All right, so we're back in the world of Path of Exile 2, and just like you saw with the title today, I wanted to talk about my brutal, honest, opinion feedback thing about Path of Exile 2, because I have been playing Path of Exile 2 for quite a few hours. I am sitting at, I'll show you on screen now. Let's swap over to the scene. 169 hours, nice. I have two characters, a 85 Warbringer and a 77 Gemling Legionnaire. So I have a good amount of experience and understanding of the game. I am in the tier 14 maps, as well as explored a good portion of the Atlas. So at this point, I have a good understanding. I wanted to specifically wait until I actually explored the end game to give an opinion. I saw a lot of videos of giving opinions during the campaign. I think that's just horseshit way of making content. I want to wait till I actually played the game. So as you could probably tell, I have a good understanding of the game despite not facing off against any of the Pentacle bosses yet. So just keep in mind I haven't faced off against those guys, so I don't know how strong they are. With that in mind, I want to go over my feedback and my thoughts about Path of Exile 2, because despite being very positive about the game, there are some negatives and some of the things that, in my opinion, is making it less than good compared to games like Path of Exile 1. Because if you guys want to know, since a lot of you asked me, do I think Path of Exile 2 is better than PoE 1? No, it's not even close. That's okay, because PoE 1 has been out for a decade at this point. But with that said, there are some things that holds Path of Exile 2 back that I think that the team should have some feedback for. This is not one of those videos about me glazing. This is one of my videos about giving harsh feedback. So if you're not comfortable with that, go ahead and just turn the video off now. I'm not being nice, I'm just giving my honest opinion. So let's start off with some of the problems that I think the game have, starting with the campaign. And the campaign early on is way too hard. At the end of the day, I think Act 1 and Act 2 is by far the hardest parts of this entire game, and that is a problem. So for those of you who are wondering, no, it is not too hard for me. I have 13,000 hours in PoE 1. I have plenty of hours in PoE 2. I can complete every bit of this content. I have no problem with that. But where the problem comes in is when you have a lot of players, not so experienced like me, who jumps in and can't even complete the game or get past Act 2 because of how bad it is. And when I say bad, I mean the balancing of it. Now, I have a total of 5 friends. Each one of them has never played Path of Exile before, and every single one of them besides one of them is not capable of getting past Act 1 before leaving. And the reason for that is, well, like I just said, the game is very, very difficult. Now, here's the problems with it. First off, scarcity of items. It is very hard to get any items to improve your damage. Players who are new are not going to know how to craft a bow or craft an item or gamble an item or get enough gold to gamble an item between swapping their build out, because they didn't choose enough damage, because you kind of need to pick damage early. I feel like every build I've played thus far during the leveling, I've picked damage early to make it through the campaign, because I just don't have enough damage and don't have enough gear. I would also like to point out that there is a very heavy skill imbalance early on, especially for melee. And I'm so sick of having this conversation over the past decade. I feel like I say this every single time I talk about melee and Path of Exile. It is so egregiously bad compared to just being a ranger. Here's the thing. If I have to shoot a single bow using a singular skill and I can complete all the content, and a warrior has to use 40 skills to do less damage, that is a problem. And that is a problem that's been active in PoE so long that is frustrating that I'm still having the same talk in PoE 2. It's a great thing I'm a variety content creator, so I don't have to deal with this shit constantly, but the balance is ridiculous, and in campaign is really hard. Now, how we fix this problem is very simple, and this is my opinion. At least from a melee warrior perspective, the reason why this is hard is because these skills here, they're all dog shit, and they don't have any single target. Plenty of AoE, especially with Bone Zone and the stuns, but single target is ass until you get perfect strike or a bone shatter, and it's really hard to play until then. And these skills are relevant in PoE till Act 1 and Act 2, and this is where a lot of the problem lies, in my personal opinion. So if we could probably balance that out, things will feel a lot better. There's many other reasons. The other one, in my opinion, is the fact that there is very hard for players to actively get weapons. Every single one of my friends, by the time they got to Act 1 boss, they were still using a really crappy random garbage item that they found on the ground, because one, they couldn't find a bow, they didn't have enough currency to craft, if they even knew how to craft I'd like to point out, because that's not explained in any way, shape, or form. I know how to craft because I have 13,000 hours, but they didn't know that. That's not explained. They didn't get an item. Path of Exile 1 did this really well. Act 7, they'll give you like a 4-link pair of boots. I think like Act 9, you get, I think like an armor or something. There's so many mechanics in PoE 1 that made it easier for you to possibly get a piece of armor or a gear so you can actually get power. As to where in PoE 1 right now, it's like every vendor or every person that has a side quest just gives you a goddamn gem. Like, yeah, the gems are gonna help, but like I actually need my weapon to deal damage, and I have no way of getting a weapon. And if I'm new to the game and I don't have experience, I'm definitely not figuring that out. And that's literally how every time they had a problem, I had to go look and ask them, hey, what's your weapon like? And it's crappy because they don't know how to get it. So a good fix for that would be like maybe give a weapon as a reward that has like some decent roll. It doesn't even have to have good rolls. Just give them something, a rare weapon or something. I don't know. Just give them the ability to do so. Also, I think gold needs to be increased just a little bit because there is a over reliance on gambling in this game, which we're going to talk about in a second on the crafting section. Overall, the campaign is way too hard. Range is way stronger than melee again. It's too scarce. It's too hard to figure out. People don't understand how to link their stuff. People don't know how to do anything. And you add that in addition to these fairly tough boss fights and very strong mobs, it's really hard. All right. So for me, the first big problem in Path of Exile 2 is it's just too hard in the first 2 acts. And that's a problem. And I know Path of Exile 2, when Path of Exile has this elitist community that has this problem that think they're better than they actually are, but it is not good when players quit and stop playing the game. So no, it is not a good thing that those people leave. It is a bad thing when people leave, because Act 1 and Act 2 is the hardest part of the game, where most players are going to be starting the game from. Well, everyone's going to be starting the game from. That's not good. So yeah, that needs to be addressed instantly. The other thing I need to talk about beyond the campaign is crafting. Now, for me, before I started playing Path of Exile 2, I said in a video, I don't know which one it was, but what was going to make or break Path of Exile 2 was going to be the crafting. If the crafting is good, especially for me. I don't know about for the rest of you, how good or impactful crafting is for you, but for me, the crafting has to be reasonable. And right now, the crafting is bad. Like, that's the only thing I can think of. Crafting is bad, and I don't even want to call it crafting because I don't perceive it as crafting. I perceive it as looking for a base on the ground. If I have the ability to get an essence, which I hyper invested in on my tree, by the way, and I hardly ever get a greater essence. I've only seen 3 greater essences, by the way, since I've invested in the essence tree, which is ridiculous, by the way. But let's say, for example, I somehow had the stars align. It is such a massive gamble to get a piece of gear to work. It's insane. I know Chris joked about this a couple of years ago, where he was like, they want you to pick up an item and just exalt slam. And while that was very clearly foreshadowing for Path of Exile 2, or maybe Ruthless, because that's kind of what Path of Exile 2 is, it's just dog shit. Like, the crafting is not fun, the crafting is not good, and for me, as a player who plays trade, it is much better to just hold your exalted orbs and just go buy it. Like, unless you have egregious amount of hours to play, like maybe like some of the content creators like I do, it doesn't feel worth it to craft in this game, and that's not healthy because it's just basically gambling. The over reliance in gambling on this game is ridiculous, and it definitely needs some work. I've never personally felt so interested in just sitting on the like trade website and just buying items, because I'm just so discouraged to crafting, because the crafting is so dog water. This is by far, in my opinion, the things that bring Path of Exile 2 down by a large margin. It's purely that. Like, such a large margin is because of that. Now I want to move on to other things, and let's talk about the end game, because this one is very loaded, because as far as I'm concerned, the extreme vast majority of the problems besides crafting comes from the end game and the pacing and things like that. So the first one is the end game is confusing. There's a lot of good systems, but nothing is really explained. Now let me be clear. I understand that I'm trying to get into these citadels here and like get into them. I need to find the individual keys and do things like that. But the problem comes in where it comes to, I don't really feel like there's a good pacing to do those things. Like right now, all I'm doing is going from point to point, finishing different maps and upgrading the maps, and just kind of exploring this atlas, and that's kind of it. And while that's not terrible, it's not good, especially when you compare it to PoE 1, where I feel like at the time investment that I have right now in Path of Exile 2, I would have easily fought a I would have fought Syrian Atriarch at this point. You know, I would have interacted with some of the Pinnacle bosses at this point. I would have seen like Maven doing stuff on the map. I would have seen Eater of Worlds interacting on the map, hearing Sir's voice. Like at this point in the game, I would have had some form of interaction with some of the in-game systems beyond just clicking on a map, facing off against a bunch of trash mobs in a really large map full of nothingness, and then hoping that I find some place on the map to open up a key to go into this burning monolith. And to be quite frank, I have not gone to the monolith, haven't gone into it because I haven't found any of those like locations yet, because I'm just kind of crawling through the map, you know, and this precursor nonsense. But the problem I'm trying to get at is it just the pacing of the in-game feels incomplete. And I know they put a lot of effort into getting an in-game out, but it still feels incomplete. I mean, the systems are there, but it just doesn't feel like there's really much to do in the in-game besides farm. And I feel like there needs to be some type of story element. I feel like there needs to be a goal that was more obvious than what we have currently available, and that's a pretty big problem. It's early access, so I can excuse it, and that's completely fine, but that is still something I think is important. But with that in mind, there's still some other things that are kind of annoying beyond just that. Like when I talked about the maps themselves are way too big. I feel like if you're going to be limiting mobility so much, that you need to make the maps feel better. They're way too long, they're way too big, they're way too empty, and the fact that I need to kill rares constantly is kind of ass. Because there has been so many times where I've gone into a mission and I can't see where the rares are. I'll go all the way across the map. I can't leave the map and come back in because the teleport system's different, so I can't just go back to the beginning of the portal. But anyway, I'll get to the very end of it. I'll kill like enough enemies, and lo and behold, there was like a really small corner in the back that I didn't see, and the elite is just sitting there in the back doing nothing. And now I have to trog like 3.5 minutes across the whole entire map to just go kill that enemy. That is not a fun gameplay loop to me. Me sitting there running back and forth is not. I don't want to play fucking Mario Kart. I want to play Path of Exile, and I want to go get the monster and kill it, you know? And the way the system is currently set up, it's bad. Just show them on the map. I know that's going to encourage people to beeline to them, but the maps are way too big and we are way too slow. There's not even enough mobility skills for most character classes in the game right now. I'm running around like, this is ridiculous. I'm a mercenary running around with a shield and one-hand mace because I need to have a mobility skill. Like, that's ridiculous. The other change that could really help this is whenever we face off against the boss, like the actual boss of the arena, when we do the boss fights, if we kill the boss, show us where the elites are on the map, or do something on the atlas. I don't care. Just make it so we can see the elites, because right now going around the map is deplorably like boring and is not good at all. The other thing is, while in those maps, some maps are really, really bad at visual clarity. Not just from like the layout of things. Like, for example, sometimes when you're walking next to a wall, you can't visually see your character. So if I'm approaching an elite where I can't visually see because the wall is there, I don't know what kind of ground effects is sitting there ready to one-shot me, which we're going to talk about in a second. So the layout of the maps just visually is hard to see, and then the ground, especially like the foliage heavy ones that like has the little poison flowers and stuff like that, it is visually hard to see where I'm walking. I'm literally only moving at all times. Like I'm a warrior, and I don't even play warriors. I play a Warcry build because it's easier to not get stuck in animation and roll up to like some on ground effect. And keep in mind, this is after the after the changes on the ground effects. They're still dog shit. The only thing that kills me right now in my in the last 2 days, I died 4 times. All 4 times have been ground effects that I couldn't see on the ground. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, I know a lot of times we want to give Diablo 4 a hard time about their like ground effects explosion stuff, but like DGG is not doing a good job with it either. It's dog shit too. I get one game's in early access and one isn't, but it's still bad. And I think that's not a good look, and I think it's really bad. Really should be dying to the mechanics of the boss and not to ground effects. Like, I can't stress that enough. The damage on that stuff still needs to be toned down, in my opinion. The visual clarity of that stuff needs to be much more clear, and some of the cast animations on some of those monsters that can have like really dangerous spells, I'm talking about white mobs, not rare mobs. I'm not talking about magic monsters, elite uniques. I'm talking about white mobs like the miner guy. That thing does egregious damage. There's like a chaos sorceress that casts a spell right under you with almost no cast delay, does monstrous damage. White mobs are the scariest mobs in the game, and that is not healthy. That is just poorly balanced. So ground effects, white mob balance, map visual clarity, the ground clutter, not good. Needs to fix that. Still not great. This brings me to the other issue, which I just said a second ago, which is the bosses, collision, and boss fights. I have not played a video game in my 28 years. I'm not 27, I've just been playing games that long. 28 years of playing video games. I have never played a video game and thought, man, the collision in this game is so fucking annoying. That has never crossed my mind. It may have like once, but it's never been a reoccurring thing like in Path of Exile 2. And this actually comes down to like one of the problems I had with Path of Exile 2 that I was worried about before the launch was, I feel like Path of Exile has this problem where I feel like they want to be different so much from PoE 1 that it's going to become a detriment to the progression of the game to make it feel good and fun. Because I feel like what should be like on the forefront is not your like principles or everything. It should be the fun for the players to play. And I do feel like this collision bullshit is because of the principle of you wanting to be different from PoE 1. Like, no one likes this collision shit. And even more so, this is actually compounded by some of the boss design. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, PoE seasoned players, but I don't recall a boss fight that trapped you in with the intention of killing you with mobs and AoE ground effects. Like, Osiris does it a little bit when he traps you in his little maze, but that's different. Like, the design of that is to not get you killed from trapping you, but it's more of you need to navigate out of it, if that makes sense. It's a little bit different. For example, there's a boss here that does this, like in the cemetery, she'll summon a ton of mobs, and it feels like the purpose of those mobs is not there to like help you with flash charges. It's purely there to clutter you. So whenever they spam the two ground effects that they spam, which they spam like a AoE blast next to themselves, they spam this little thing that fly towards you and blow up, and then a AoE that she summons on under your feet. And it feels like that design there is purely with the intention of you dying because you got stuck on the NPCs. Like, I don't like that. I think that's really scumbag design, and I don't recall Path of Exile 1 having that much of a scumbag design, and this is just one example of that. But there's a lot of examples of me dying because not of the interesting boss fight mechanics, but because I'm trying to kill you cheaply with getting you stuck. And I think that's by far the most frustrating part of Path of Exile 2, is that deviation from making really good boss fights, which you still do, but trying to overly kill the player is influencing bad decisions. And that's what I think is the ultimate thing. You're trying to kill the player so much that is leading you to make decisions that makes the game feel unfun, like the collision bullshit. So yeah, that's my whole rant about the collision. I think it's really bad, and I think you guys should try to focus on killing the player a little bit less and making a game that feels fun a little bit more, in my opinion. With that, let's continue on. There's more to this rant. I want to talk about the passive tree, because the passive tree is atrocious. So let's go look at the passive tree, because I feel like one thing I want to talk about first off is the life nodes and energy shield. And there's two things I want to talk about. One, what the hell is all this? Why does this side of the tree have so much energy shield and this side have almost no life? You want to know something that's really messed up about all this? Is one thing I heard about Path of Exile 2 before playing was there was going to be a lesson over reliance on getting life on the tree, right? And then you look at most builds, and you look at my builds and things like that, in a lot of cases what we grab is stats. We grab strength a lot, like my mercenary, strength heavy, all my warriors, strength heavy, and I haven't played anyone else, but there is a very strong reliance on grabbing stat nodes, and that is literally no different from me grabbing a life node. Is you literally replace stat nodes life nodes with stat nodes. There's no difference. And in my opinion, from playing this, I've never felt like there was less choice in Path of Exile than PoE 2. In PoE 1, there was so many choices. Like, I could, if I'm playing a two-hander, there was like multiple ways to play the two-hander. Like, yeah, a lot of times we picked a lot of the same things, but there was definitely versatility. Like, the limiting thing was the life nodes, right? And I understand that, but in the same vein, there's so many limiting things on this tree. I feel like I'm forced to build a very specific way as a warrior. And I'm a Warcry warrior, and I feel like I take a lot of the same things as a melee warrior. And as my melee warrior friends, when I look at every single one of their skill trees, regardless of what they pick exactly the same things. Almost eye for eye, T for T. Like, literally every single thing is almost exactly the same, besides a handful of like nuanced things. And I feel like this was something I felt was going to be different in PoE 2, and I feel like completely bored looking at this tree. Like, I don't want anything. Like, right now I don't want anything. Like, I'm literally just grabbing defense because for the sake of grabbing defense, because there's just nothing to enable my Warcry build. Now it's just me grabbing the same exact 10 nodes everyone grabs, and then just pumping a bunch of stats. So when it comes to like the passive skill tree, it feels boring. It feels actually just straight up boring. And there's a massive imbalance in energy shield. But yeah, not good. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is one thing I thought I would like a lot more. I mean, I was willing to just give it a chance. The biggest problem I have in the end game is the portal system. So the fact that you only get one portal is actually pretty bad right now. And I think that's a combination of reasons. The first off, there's a lot of like deaths that I feel isn't the player's fault, like the on death effects that you can't see in the ground, bad tuning of the monsters hitting way too hard than they need to be, the over reliance in defense, like your Garen needing so much defense to be viable. The other problem is with the one portal system is it discourages players to want to try things, and this was something I think a lot of creators and players talked about before. The problem is whenever you're going into a new fight and you're going to face off against a boss and you don't know what they do, and they have all these dangerous one-shot mechanics, which from what I can tell tends to have a lot of strong one-shot mechanics, it discourages players from wanting to play it. Because in PoE 1 you had 6 portals and you could learn how to play a game, and that's something that's super important in a game overall, like the discovering and willingness to get better. Like, when we talk about having to try another boss fight, that's from what I can tell looking at the prices, that's 100, I think 100 exalted right now to be able to try a boss encounter. And if you make a mistake simply because it's new and it's overtuned and you don't see some of the ground effects and many other things, you instantly lose that opportunity. And in that case, like for me as a player who has all the time in the world to game, I don't want to do that. Like, fuck no, I'm not gonna waste my time doing that. Why do that when I can just, I don't know, go buy a piece of armor with that 100 div or something else, you know what I mean? And like put me in the same shoes of someone who has a normal 9 to 5, who only has 4 hours to 8 hours a day to play a video game, you know, in their free time. Like, I'm not dropping 100 exalted just so I can try a boss fight that may one-shot me because I don't have the ability to try it. I think that's very counterintuitive to like the spirit of gaming. Like, you want to try something out but not feel like you're gonna just get completely mollywhopped for trying it and like break your bank. Like, that's not fun. And I think when it comes down to it, a lot of the problems with a lot of these things I complain about right now, is that it just doesn't feel fun. And I feel like when we're talking about a game, like, that's what the ultimate goal should be. I know Path of Exile and the Path of Exile community has this problem where they think they're the best gamers in the world and you need to be the elitist and the super hardcore gamers, but like at the forefront of gaming should always be fun. And I feel like when I play a lot of these systems, the gambling, the bad balance, I don't have fun with it. It doesn't feel hardcore. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm overcoming. It just feels like tedium, and it feels unfun. And that's, in my opinion, why I personally don't feel like Path of Exile 2 is better than PoE 1. Now, that's not to say that these things can't be changed. Of course, they can, you know, tune some of this and balance some of this a lot better. But at the heart of it, I'm not really having as much fun as I had in Path of Exile 1. And one thing I didn't even talk about is, like, I haven't even felt that wow factor in the PoE 2. Like, I think we all complained about this in Diablo 4, where there was not really any items that felt like, wow, this is super cool, you know? And Diablo 4 had that problem too. But in PoE 2, I feel like I have that same problem. Maybe I'm just insensitive. I'm not sensitive to it anymore. And that's not true, because when I play PoE 1, when a Divine Orb drops, I feel excited, you know? I feel like I'm gonna accomplish something, and, you know, it feels cool to show off. In PoE 2, I have not felt that feeling of wow. I haven't been wowed yet. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this rant. I don't want to overly do it because I don't want to lean into negative and opinion. I want to focus on like what I think the game has problems with and not just my personal feelings. Overall, that's my thoughts on Path of Exile 2. I still think it's the second best ARPG on the market, possibly third best ARPG on the market, behind Path of Exile 1, by the way, because PoE 1 is still fundamentally a better ARPG than PoE 2 at the moment. But I like to know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What are you liking, disliking, your experience in PoE 2? You know, leave it down in the comments. Don't be a dick about it. We're all here to give feedback, and we want you know, GGG to see this feedback, and you guys leaving comments actually help that. So give your comments, let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna go play some more PoE 2 and hopefully not die to a ground effect. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.